Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Sugar Mama's Fireplay. I am your host, financial planner Canna Campbell, and as always, I'm here every Monday morning at 5 a.m. to help make sure that you start your week off on an informed, inspired, and most importantly, educated note when it comes to achieving all of those very important and very exciting financial goals and dreams. Now, today is a Start Here episode. This is where I give some very general advice as to particular situations and questions that you guys may have to help you start your financial journey, particularly if you're experiencing a block or perhaps analysis paralysis where you don't know what to do or how to get started. So this hopefully helps clear the block. Now, of course, it is extremely important, particularly with these types of episodes, that you understand that nothing is ever personal advice. This is purely for educational purposes only. And whilst I may talk about different ideas, different strategies, or even mention different type of asset classes, please know this is not personal advice whatsoever. It is essential that you use this to help build your own financial literacy. And then you go and take that to a financial planner to discuss with them in relation to your own personal financial situation and, of course, those exciting financial goals and dreams. All right, so the other day I received on Instagram a DM, and the DM, obviously I will not be sharing the person's contact details, but it said this: "Hi Canna, I listen to and love your podcast, as well as How Do They Afford That? I have a question. I'm in the process of selling an investment property that is looking like it will give me $300,000 in my pocket. The question is, what is the best thing to do with that sum? I think the most obvious and potentially safe option is to put it in an offset account against my mortgage. I have approximately $1 million left on our home. But then I listened to the episode with your money mentor, that is Peter Thornhill, and started to think about other options that could potentially have some or all of my money working harder for me. For example, buying some shares that pay dividends that I could then eventually learn to live off. Now, my long-term goal is to buy a $2 million house, but that doesn't need to be for the next 5 to 7 years. Is this something that you could potentially answer for me without giving personal advice and keep it general in nature to my situation?" All right, so to the person that sent me this question, I'm so glad I'm actually getting the opportunity to actually come back to you. And of course, again, just to really reiterate, this is general advice only because I don't know what your risk profile is. I don't know what your mortgage is exactly. I don't know, anything about your job security, whether you've got superannuation, what insurance policies you have in place. So please bear that in mind. So the first thing that stands out, right, immediately to like a sore thumb is the fact that you aren't ready. You would never want to make a knee-jerk, rash decision, particularly with large amounts of money like this. So if you were sitting in front of me or you and I were friends having coffee together, my advice would be actually do nothing. Do nothing with that money, that is, but use this time immediately to start educating yourself on different investments, understanding what your risk profile is, understanding what's a priority for you, where your values sit, and of course the deadlines for all of these goals. And of course, from the limited information that I have around this person's situation, yes, that does sound like wise advice. Putting it in your offset account or your redraw facility, obviously checking with the bank beforehand in case you're on a fixed term because there may be some penalties involved. But at least in the meantime, that $300,000, which is a lot of money, that $300,000 can help you by reducing the interest that you're paying each month. And assuming that you can afford to maintain the same mortgage repayments, it will mean that you're actually making a greater progress with paying down your home loan in the meantime, whilst that money sits in either the offset account or the redraw facility. But as I said, use this time immediately to get started with building up your own level of financial literacy and education. My next piece of advice would be to read Mindful Money. Now, in Mindful Money, I have a whole chapter dedicated to this idea called debt recycling. No, I'm not necessarily recommending a debt recycling strategy, but it's something that it's worth considering amongst other various wealth creation strategies. So debt recycling allows you to have the best of both worlds. It allows you to continue on working on paying off your mortgage as quickly as possible, saving valuable time and interest, and sometimes that can be into the tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars of interest, but allow you to diversify outside of the family home. So as you pay down the home loan, you redraw the equity through a separate investment loan, and you would go and invest that in, typically speaking, a high growth asset such as shares or property. That is two-dimensional assets that provide long-term capital growth and long-term growing passive income streams. Now, obviously with a high growth investment like shares or property, they tend to be volatile, very volatile, particularly from a surface level shares, because you can see the value of a share at any second of the day, where you can't as much with, say, property. Anytime you can see the value of property is when you go to buy and when you go to sell. Having said that, though, you need to understand that if you are to do a strategy like this, it is a high risk strategy, and you are using that borrowed money, which comes with risks, lots of risks that definitely can be managed wisely and correctly, but that money is then used to buy high risk investments. Now, the benefit of doing this is it allows you to obviously diversify, as I said, but it means you're actually making the most of time. Whilst you're busy focusing on paying off your home loan, that lump sum that you have, say, withdrawn through your investment loan, and it's important that you get a good quality mortgage broker to set this up for you, because you need to make sure you've separated your loan and it's a genuine investment loan, so that when it comes to doing your taxes, you can see what interest is non-deductible and what interest is deductible. But it means, for example, that $300,000 can be withdrawn. So you place it against the home loan, reduces the home loan by $300,000, is then taken back out through an investment loan. And so you now have home loans come down by 300, but now you have a new investment loan of 300,000. That $300,000 could be invested as you wish. And of course, as I said, you're paying interest on your home loan. And as you are aware, you are paying your normal mortgage repayments on your existing home loan, but you now also need to account for the fact you have a $300,000 investment loan. So that $300,000 would typically be invested in something that's going to provide long-term returns that exceed the cost of borrowing. So for example, if I am borrowing, an investment loan at 6 or 6.5%, I want to make sure that my long-term, and the key word being long-term here, returns will exceed the cost of 6.5%. So I'm actually getting ahead financially. Now, the interest on the investment loan is tax deductible, but at the same time, any income I receive through, for example, rent or dividends will be taxable as well. So it needs to be managed very carefully. Now, yes, there are lots of risks involved, but the good news is when you understand what you're doing and you do it in an intelligent way with the backing of a qualified financial planner who's licensed and, of course, an experienced mortgage broker, you can actually proactively manage this type of strategy to make it less risky. Things like making sure that your portfolio is properly diversified, making sure that you have a really strong cash flow where you can service multiple interest rate rises on your home loan and, of course, on the investment loan as well. Making sure that you structure the loans, for the investment loan in particular, maybe as principal interest rather than interest only. Making sure that you reinvest your dividends if that's something that would work for you to help build up greater equity within your investment portfolio, or using that rent to actually pay down that investment loan, assuming you use that money to buy a property. So what it's allowing you to do is obviously now you don't just own your home, you have your home and you also have a diversified share portfolio. You now own another property that's being invested and rented out. And you get tax concessions along the way, potentially, and depreciation as well if you're buying property. So that is something definitely worth considering in the mix of other things, but it's not for everyone. And when I say this is a long-term strategy, as an absolute minimum, this is 10 years or longer. Now, to come back to your comment about investing in shares, and you love the fact that Peter Thornhill has an amazing strategy, which is one I personally follow myself, about investing in Australian industrial shares. You could most definitely use this strategy, but that is use that $300,000 recycled through your home to build up a diversified share portfolio. And you could have those dividends potentially paid to you to help pay off your home loan off even faster. Or you could have those dividends reinvested, just as you say, and then let that portfolio grow and compound over the long run. And eventually, one day you can switch off that automatic dividend reinvestment plan and start living off that passive income from that share portfolio. And yes, that would obviously contribute towards your financial freedom and independence. So that is definitely something worth learning about, researching, asking lots of questions and getting some, licensed advice from a financial planner about. However, I have to say, you've flagged something else with me that's just very, very important, is that note of wanting to upgrade the family home in the next 5 to 7 years. Ideally, when it comes to, moving homes and upgrading, we don't want to be taking on too much more debt. We want to make sure that we're not going to be, retiring still with a whopping great big mortgage. We need to be realistic as to the loan that we're taking and making sure that we can pay that loan off eventually before retiring. There is nothing worse than, looking at someone's finances and realizing they're still going to have a huge mortgage into retirement and they're going to be forced into a position where they do have to downsize the home. Of course, there are situations that actually is the best thing for them. That's perfectly fine. But as a financial planner, you're always trying to maximize choice for clients. You want them to be able to pick and choose what suits them best and not ever be backed into a corner because of lack of money or because they previously made a regretful financial decision. So what would I be thinking about as, again, sitting, if we were having coffee together? I'd be talking to you about obviously looking at your mortgage story. What are you doing to help pay that mortgage off? What if you could find a way to allow this debt recycling strategy so you're actually getting some tax efficiency and you're building wealth in other areas out of your home? But what can you potentially do to get ahead and actually pay your home off sooner within the next 5 to 7 years? Because if you can sell your home with barely any mortgage at all, that means you've got a huge deposit to potentially be upgrading. And because you have a huge deposit to potentially be upgrading to that $2 million home, perhaps that then means that you will have a really small mortgage in buying that $2 million home. These are all things that you need to be considering. I would then be talking to you about what you have as superannuation. Yes, it is so important to diversify outside of the family home if you want financial freedom and independence, but it's not the be-all and end-all. Your superannuation is essentially an investment portfolio. Is just simply locked away by our government because they know we're going to blow it and spend it. So I would be looking at your superannuation and treating that as much importance as building up an investment portfolio and talking to you about, okay, well, you're looking at a debt recycling strategy here that's going to help you save some money. Is there now the opportunity to maybe look at, some salary sacrificing perhaps? And if we look at how much money you've got in superannuation and how much potentially we could put more into superannuation, obviously being mindful of the caps, that is the limits as to how much you can salary sacrifice and put extra into super because they are per financial year. How much is that going to add value to you wanting to be financially free and independent? And if you loved Peter Thornhill's philosophy, you can actually apply that philosophy with your superannuation money. That is, look at the underlying investments within your superannuation and look at potentially, after getting advice and understanding, capital gains and brokerage and all those important finer details, but potentially that superannuation money could be invested in the same way that Peter Thornhill preaches, Australian industrial shares. So there are actually lots of things you can think about and consider in your situation. And I have to say this is because incredibly responsible, but also incredibly important, is if you are looking at something like this type of strategy, are you going to look at your insurances? Are you going to look at the safety nets that you have in place? Do you have the right amount of emergency money set up? How much do you have in your redraw facility already? How secure is your job? Do you have an income protection policy? Do you have life and TPD cover? Do you have a trauma policy? If you are looking at taking on additional risk, whether it be through a loan, whether it be through a career path and new investment, you've got to always come back to looking at your safety nets and looking at as to how do you best proactively protect your financial future, but also your financial well-being and your family's financial well-being. It is really important because life can change in the blink of an eye. And the moment you get a test result or the moment an ambulance is called or the moment something doesn't feel well, it's too late to go and apply for those insurances. You want to be on the front foot with reviewing your personal insurances and making any changes necessary with the guidance of a financial planner. So essentially, yes, you can look at having the best of both worlds, but a debt recycling strategy is something definitely I would consider and learn more about if it's right for you. If you learn about it and go, you know what, it's fascinating, but I don't feel comfortable taking on that type of risk right now, that's perfectly fine. And in fact, I think that's great that you can recognize that. The important point here is that you know and understand what debt recycling is, and you know that it is an option for you. Because in 6 months' time or even 6 years' time, you might come back to this idea and go, you know what, I actually think this is now the right time to do it. And I now feel ready. And I know all the risks involved. And I also know all the right ways to actually manage this risk. And as I said, in Mindful Money, I have a whole list of different sort of, you could call safety nets to go through to make sure that you can cross-check everything you've done to protect this type of strategy so that it works for you in the safest way possible. Of course, not bulletproof, but it significantly reduces those risks. I would then also recommend that you go and grab a copy of Motivated Money so that you can really understand, before you make any investment decisions, whether it be property or shares, the difference between the two different asset classes and how they work and the pros and cons for each of those, so that when you do look at this strategy, whether it be through a debt recycling strategy or whether it just be a simple lump sum of that $300,000, you can do so understanding what you're doing. But with any type of high risk investment, such as shares or property, you need to know these are long-term investments. So a period of 5 to 7 years, in my personal and professional opinion, is not really long enough to see that money working for you. It's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market. So if you do commit to a property strategy or a share portfolio strategy, you need to be giving it a minimum, an absolute minimum of 10 years or longer. And coming from myself personally and professionally, when I buy shares, I don't buy them thinking I'm going to own them for 20 years or 30 years. I actually buy them knowing that I'm going to hold them indefinitely. Because for me, when I'm acquiring an investment asset, I am buying a passive income stream, and I am buying a growing passive income stream through industrial shares. So I have zero interest in actually ever selling those investments. I want to hold them for the long run, because if I sell those investments, I'm essentially cutting off my passive income stream and cutting off my financial freedom and independence. So coming back to that point, if you don't want to take on a debt recycling strategy, you definitely can consider using that $300,000 to invest and build up a diversified investment portfolio. But please do not go into it thinking you need that money back out in 5 to 7 years, because there will be market volatility, short to medium term market volatility, and you are running a great risk of seeing that portfolio temporarily being less than that $300,000 when you actually need that money to be able to achieve your other goal of upgrading the family home to around $2 million. So as you can hear, there is a lot to consider. You've got to consider debt recycling. You've got to consider potentially a simple lump sum investment. You've got to consider your time frame. You've got to do a risk profile. You've also got to consider the cash flow of servicing an investment loan. And of course, those personal goals of wanting to upgrade the family home, and whether you don't necessarily really want to do it in 5 years, 7 years, but perhaps you're happy to wait even longer, or perhaps you want to do it sooner. There is so much to consider. But in summary, to help you get started and to help you find some sense of clarity and to help find your feet so that you can get started, can I recommend that you start with a mindful money number? That is, ask yourself, how much income would you like to receive in passive income to have financial freedom and independence? Take that number and then work back from there. By doing this, you can understand the power of that $300,000 and how it can be invested or used in alignment, a positive alignment, to helping you achieve that particular passive income goal. By doing that, the right strategy, the smart strategy, the intelligent strategy, the strategy that matches your risk profile and your comfort levels when it comes to investing will start to become apparent as you go down the financial literacy education path. So to this very special listener, thank you so much for sending through your question to me. I really hope this particular episode has really got you thinking, and you actually understand there are lots of different options available for you, but you've got to understand the importance of time and the importance of long-term, being patient and allowing your money to work for you in an efficient way. But the sooner you get started in educating yourself and understanding all the different pros and cons that come from various different strategies, you will see that actually what you want to achieve is quite possibly within your financial reach. And you can quite possibly have the best of all worlds and achieve all of your financial goals and dreams. So thank you everyone for listening to this Start Here mini-series. Let me know what you think of this. And of course, please don't hesitate to send through your questions to me, always keeping in mind that my answers are always going to be general in nature and for your financial educational purposes only. This is Sugar Mama's Fireplay.